During the extreme cold apocalypse, I huddled with my daughter in the shelter, shivering, while my missing husband appeared on TV, owning the largest greenhouse in City A. It was then I learned that, as the last person to see my father, he had altered the inheritance. I spent all my savings to rent a tank, braving the harsh cold to take my daughter and confront him. But all I found was Chin Huizhou throwing a party in the greenhouse, with dozens of attractive men and women clinging to him for survival. With tears and anger, I questioned him, holding my critically ill daughter. He vaguely explained. Embarrassed to the point of rage, he pushed my daughter and me out of the base. Go to hell. When I reopened my eyes, I found myself back on the last night with my father as I watched my husband leave with a nervous expression. I hugged my daughter tightly and stopped him with a cold smile. Wait, we're going together. This time, face your miserable days alone. Chin Huizhou's eyes darted around nervously, clearly hiding something as he stammered. It's so late, I'm afraid you'll get too tired. I mocked inwardly, only now realizing I'm tired. You never hesitated to leave all the dirty and tiring work for me before. Without responding, I directly placed my daughter in his arms and headed out. Let's go. The moment I saw my father's wan face again, my tears couldn't be held back any longer. I was abducted as a child and grew up in an orphanage. It wasn't until after I got married that I was found. I wasn't close to my father, and moreover, because my father couldn't stand Chin Huizhou, I rarely visited him out of spite in my past life. Until one period, Chin Huizhou suddenly began to show unusual attentiveness, visiting my father as if ingratiating himself against a cold reception. I didn't understand at the time, but later realized it was all to alter the inheritance. With his last breath, it was as if my father was holding on just to see me, speaking weakly and deliberately. In this life, Dad has let you down. The trust fund is all set up for you. Father took his last breath, his eyes still open wide. I wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes and tremblingly closed my father's eyes. Chin Huizhou watched all of this, nearly grinding his teeth to pieces. It wasn't until the car drove out of my father's estate that he finally couldn't hold back and casually spoke up. Well, Jinjin, this money, since you don't have much ability anyway and I specialize in finance, just right?
No.
I chuckled coldly in my heart and interrupted directly. My father's body wasn't even cold yet, and his ugly side had already been fully exposed. Chin Huizhou immediately sat up, blurting out in a panic. You can't handle such a large sum of money. Don't you trust me? I'm your husband. Our darling daughter is already so big. Don't you trust me? I pulled the CAR over to the side of the road, handed the headphones to my daughter in the car seat in the back, letting her listen to music on her own, then turned and stared straight at Chin Huizhou. He frowned, irritated, trying to morally coerce me, with a desire in his eyes. In the last minute of the previous life, he arrogantly and brazenly pushed my daughter and me off a 20-story high base. He didn't spare an ounce of sentiment. At that time, did he ever consider himself my husband? Did he ever think of our child? The excruciating pain of that last moment resurfaced, and I shivered slightly. Finding it ironic, after a moment, I calmly said, No, I don't believe you. Let's get a divorce. Chin Huizhou's face, that had thrived on borrowed power, cracked with shock. He gritted his teeth. As if weighing the pros and cons and accepting his fate in the current situation, being adaptable, he resolutely opened his mouth. Xiunjin, I'll tell you the truth, I don't care if you think I'm a fool. I know someone from the immortal family, the extreme cold apocalypse is coming. We must prepare in advance. I'll introduce him to you. As for whether we divorce or not, he shakily held my hand, shedding a few crocodile tears, saying, Let's talk about it later. I stared at him coldly without speaking. He naturally had bad intentions, smooth-talking his way through. But with the apocalypse soon upon us, he was somewhat useful. However, the risk of having him around was really too great. Our daughter in the back seat seemed to realize something, took off her headphones, paused her game, and timidly asked us, Mommy, what divorce? Chin Huizhou was startled, then smiled as he lifted our daughter from her car seat. Looking fatherly, he said to her, It's nothing, Tong Tong, we're not getting a divorce. He put her headphones back on and looked up at me, cautiously asking, Right? I glanced back at him indifferently and restarted the car, saying, Introduce me to the person now. For Tong Tong's sake and his usefulness in building the greenhouse, I'd let him stay for the time being. Until the weekend, when I met the person Chin Huizhou referred to as the spiritual being, a newly adult young man, Yunla. In my previous life, I wouldn't have been able to trust completely. But with experience from one lifetime, I held nothing back. I directly told him my idea of building the largest greenhouse in the country and asked him to help me choose a site. Unexpectedly, Yunla furrowed his brows in confusion and said in surprise, Mr. Chin already had this idea, and the site is almost finished. He should be there right now. I was taken aback. Today was supposed to be his day to take care of the child. After calling the housekeeper to confirm that the child was not at home, I frowned deeply and asked Yunla to drive to the place Qin Huizhou mentioned. I gritted my teeth, a sense of foreboding filling my heart. The villains act quietly, surely up to no good. Qin Huizhou had already found the site himself, and now he has taken his daughter there? I took a deep breath and urged Yunla to drive faster. The anxiety in my heart died completely when I saw the two entwined bodies on the control room table. Blood rushed to my head as I grabbed Qin Huizhou's hair from across the table and fiercely slapped him across the face. Mixed with the terrified screams of the woman beside him, I demanded, "Where's our daughter?" His face turned red, and clearly not yet regaining his senses, he absent-mindedly pointed to the room next to us. I gave him another slap and hurried to open the door, only to find my daughter inside, wiping away tears in the unlit room. Upon seeing me, she finally broke into loud sobs, stumbling into my arms. I picked her up, my anger reaching its peak. Qin Huizhou dared to come out and fool around, bringing our daughter along only to lock her up in this wretched place. Trusting him was a complete mistake. Storming out in rage, I saw Qin Huizhou slowly dressing himself while seated on the floor. I kicked his upper chest, sending him sprawling backward. Are you even a father? You shut your daughter in the next room while sneaking around? Are you even human? I covered my daughter's ears and furiously questioned him, while Qin Huizhou tried to explain. I gave her a game. I raised my hand to cut him off and said, "No need to say more. Let's get a divorce. And don't bother with the greenhouse or anything. Get out right now." Seeing that the situation seemed beyond repair, Qin Huizhou shamelessly revealed his ugly true colors. Divorce? Fine, you force me and Xuanjinda. The assets must be split in half. Do you know how much I've suffered being married to you? I was wrong, but you forced me. I forced him. How did I force him? By pushing him to not just lie around at home all day? By pushing him to find other women outside? Qin Huizhou has always been skilled at distorting the truth and playing the victim. At this moment, I wasn't going to waste my breath. I replied with a cold laugh. Then go ahead and sue me. Good luck with that. Then, with a glance to the security guard who had followed behind, Qin Huizhou, who hadn't even managed to properly dress, was dragged out the door. Furious and embarrassed, Qin Huizhou struggled to break free, repeatedly shouting, "I can walk by myself." In the end, he was thrown out. The girl, who had finally managed to dress herself, saw everyone's attention turn to her and was brought to tears. "I'll go myself. It was him, he forced me, he said some extreme cold apocalypse was coming soon. He said he would protect me. He said he had a way to deal with you." I frowned and told her to leave, alarm bells ringing in my mind. Qin Huizhou was relentless. Looking back, I saw Yunyuan, the distance, gently rocking and comforting his daughter, almost lulling her to sleep. The warm scene offered me a bit of solace. I stepped forward to take the child from his arms, and at the moment our wrists brushed, the boy's ears turned bright red. I glanced at him again. In the days that followed, things were relatively calm. Having taken over the remaining work from Qin Huizhou, I expanded the greenhouse and added facilities. Although a bit inexperienced, it went relatively smoothly, until there was only 1 month left before the apocalypse of my previous life, when the greenhouse was nearly complete. An unexpected incident occurred. The entire greenhouse was suddenly surrounded by special police, and all the workers, including Yunla and myself, were apprehended with much fanfare and tension. Even my 4-year-old daughter wasn't spared. According to an anonymous tip, this place is suspected of large-scale illegal drug manufacturing. After being taken to the police station, the leading special police officer spoke to us, who were in a state of panic. "Qin Huizhou, is this the mess he intended to create? This is beyond absurd, isn't it? Do you have any evidence? There must be some misunderstanding. We've already installed surveillance and are cooperating with the investigation. It shouldn't be difficult to prove we didn't do anything." I calmed my crying daughter and spoke calmly. The lead special police officer displayed photos from an anonymous report showing drug manufacturing inside the premises. I furrowed my brows and immediately replied, "This photo isn't real. It's definitely been photoshopped. Our table isn't this model." The special force officer scrutinized me with eyes like a hawk, then brought out the pictures of the white powder found at the scene. More than that, our investigation revealed that all the surveillance cameras were destroyed long ago. Do you have any explanation for this? I was momentarily speechless. Qin Huizhou, what have you done? Moreover, although your building has all the necessary approvals, the large-scale, what do you call it, greenhouse? That also raises suspicions, don't you think? The special force officer said with a tense face, squinting his eyes. I calmed myself down and said seriously, Sir, none of this was done by us. I'm absolutely certain someone is trying to frame us. That anonymous person is very likely the culprit. You must get to the bottom of this. No one responded to me, and they left us in this room that resembled a prison cell. At least take the children away from here. In the last moment, I helplessly shouted at the closed door, turning my head in despair, only to find Shi Yunle leaning nonchalantly against the corner with Tong Tong snuggled up to him. I twitched my mouth and asked, Aren't you afraid? Qin Huizhou also had a big plan brewing, and I can't even get in touch with the law. You're right now. How long can they keep us for things we didn't do? There wasn't a hint of fear on Shi Yunle's face. I couldn't tell if it was youthful bravado or if he knew something. But after we, a big group, were confined for 3 days and nights with plenty to eat and drink. Just as Shi Yunle predicted, nothing happened, and we were released. The staff expressed deep apologies to us. And we walked out the gate loaded with gifts of eggs, soy sauce, and rice. It turns out it was Tongtong's children's recorder left behind that saved us. The recording showed that the white powder was brought in by stray dogs from the neighborhood. Extremely bizarre, but it's a way to wash our hands of the situation. I know for sure it's Qin Huizhou's mischief, but I've completely lost contact with him. Shi Yunle, holding our sleeping daughter, reminded me, there aren't many days left until doomsday begins. We must hurry up. I glanced back at the nightmare-like place where we were detained for 3 days, nodded, furrowed my brow, and walked away. Some previous work had been delayed, significantly impacting progress, especially the outermost layer of insulation, which was out of stock. With doomsday approaching, it was Shi Yunle who found an alternative material. It was much more expensive but easy to install, speeding up the entire process. In short, with the power of money, the greenhouse was completed smoothly. On New Year's Eve, the extreme cold descended upon the world just as it did in the previous life, causing widespread panic. Our greenhouse played a major role. We were well prepared, and as the largest shelter in City A, we took in nearly 10,000 people in less than a week. The national television stations reported on the good deeds of our greenhouse. The base's full moon celebration is also being prepared, as we ready ourselves to celebrate this little moment of peace. During this period, scarce cakes, fresh vegetables, and unprocessed meats, we put out these precious natural ingredients with the intention of treating the residents of the greenhouse to a good meal. Magnificent fireworks lit up the sky, marking the beginning of the festivities. The crowd cheered, hearing large-scale laughter for the first time since the great cold wave arrived. I smiled as I watched all of this, filled with emotion. Shi Yunle suddenly ran over with little Tong Tong in his arms, looking anxious. He pulled me into the base's only tank, refusing to say a word. What are you doing? Is there a problem somewhere? Wasn't it agreed that all rescue plans are on hold tonight? His demeanor made me a bit nervous as well. His pupils were slightly constricted, his forehead covered in sweat, as he only focused on instructing the driver via the walkie-talkie to head to the airport. I was thoroughly enraged. I took my sleeping daughter from his arms and placed her in the seat next to me, then Dir. Eckley stopped the driver. Grabbing his collar, I lowered my voice and angrily asked, What airport? What are you going to the airport for now? Seeing that I stopped the tank, his expression finally turned to full panic, his jaw tightened as he lowered his head. The small TV beside us was broadcasting the latest news interview, and Qin Huizhou's voice rang out, Where is our greenhouse? I looked at Qin Huizhou's face on the screen in shock. Qin Huizhou even built a greenhouse. When did he do that? Where did the money come from? Suddenly, as if sensing something, I turned to Shi Yunle, incredulously asking, You? Shi Yunle raised his head, a tear trickling from the corner of his eye, and said, trembling and gritting his teeth, I used to be his man. The greenhouse has already been set on fire. The materials are flammable. This place will be completely destroyed soon. We have to leave now. In an instant, it felt as if I was struck by lightning. My legs went weak, and I could barely stand. Shi Yunle quickly reached out and firmly supported me. Realizing what happened, I swung my hand and slapped him hard. Tens of thousands of people. There are tens of thousands of people here. Tears streamed down my face as I shouted at him, voice choked with emotion. Our sleeping daughter was awakened by the commotion and started crying loudly, reaching out to us for comfort. I wiped my tears away, picked up the child, and placed her in his arms. Gripping his clothes, I said, This is not over between us. You remembered us at the end. You're still a good child. You're still part of the celestial family, and you ought to have some sense of righteousness. From now on, do good deeds, okay? In my haste, I gripped his shoulders, gritted my teeth, and urged him with a few words. Shiryun nodded slightly, though it was unclear if he truly understood. But I didn't dwell on it, as I rushed back to the outer base that was already engulfed in flames. Stopping the blaring music, I picked up the microphone. Everyone, don't panic. Protect the elderly and children. There's a fire outside. Exit and evacuate in an orderly manner. There are still people sleeping upstairs, and someone to help evacuate them. The rest joined me in fighting the fire. Just as we were preparing to grab the fire extinguishers, Shiryunla's voice rang out. The fire extinguishers are broken. Use the hoses in the back to fight the fire. People rushed towards the hoses. Shiryunla's gaze was intense as he focused on me, and I turned to follow the crowd. Luckily, there was indeed water in the hoses. As the water sprayed out, everyone visibly breathed a sigh of relief. There was a retired firefighter in our team, directing everyone to extinguish the fire in an orderly fashion, maintaining a semblance of order amidst the chaos. Fortunately, we discovered the fire in time, and it was extinguished relatively quickly. Many people's winter coats were damaged by the fire, so I urged them to quickly return inside. After calming countless people on the brink of collapse, most went back to rest, and I let out a slight sigh of relief. Staring at the mess left by the fire, lost in thought. The outermost layers of insulation were burnt, significantly reducing the warmth in some areas of the greenhouse. But at this time, nationwide transport became a big problem. Tong Tong is with Nanny Wang and has already fallen asleep. Shiryunla appeared out of nowhere, speaking in a low voice. I acknowledged with a nod. I'm sorry. After a while, he spoke, his head hanging lower than a turtle's. I sighed. Were you exhausted today? He couldn't hold it any longer, let out a deep from his throat, tears falling to the ground, stepping forward wanting to bury himself in my neck. Stop. I pulled back from the brink, creating distance between us. Explain everything. He was stunned for a moment, but eventually began telling the story in a muddled way. In summary, it wasn't complicated. Basically, Shiryunla was in desperate need of money, while Qin Huizhou, at some unknown point, had taken one of my father's overseas accounts and had money too. I initially agreed to help him temporarily, but later my conscience really couldn't take it blah blah. The more he talked, the harder he cried, as if he was terrified I would hit him. In the end, I couldn't bear to listen any longer, so I told him to go back to sleep. Early the next morning, the TV station people rushed over to report on the situation of the greenhouse from the previous night. The materials needed for greenhouse repairs were in urgent demand, so I reached out to the nation through the TV station for help. That very day, someone contacted me saying they had a way to supply them. Our greenhouse's story spread across the country. The local government also reached out to us. Of course, with all resources being scarce now, what they could provide was limited. I had only one request for the government officials, to catch the person responsible for the fire, Qin Huizhou. Due to insufficient evidence, they could only assure me they would try their best. The greenhouse began its grand reinforcement and expansion as scheduled, but suddenly I received a text message from an unknown contact on my phone. Do you like the gift I gave you? Qin Huizhou. Unconsciously, I shattered the glass I was holding, scattering shards everywhere. My assistant Xiaowen screamed and rushed over to check on me. I regained my composure and smiled, saying it was nothing. Qin Huizhou, it was all his doing, and now he dares to strut in front of me? I gritted my teeth, turned around, and asked someone to stop the TV crew, who hadn't left the base yet, and inquired if they could issue a warning and ask for help. I released all records related to the matter. The video driving Qin Huizhou away, threatening messages from Qin Huizhou, and more. As the current head of the country's largest greenhouse, I hereby warn everyone to be cautious of the Zhouyi greenhouse and its head, Qin Huizhou. He has not only repeatedly harassed me but is also a prime suspect in our greenhouse fire. I urge everyone to be careful. Our greenhouse was already highly renowned, and my warning caused a tremendous uproar online. Scared me to death. That person's greenhouse is quite close to me. I almost went there. I urged the relevant authorities to pay attention. I was planning to visit the real and Shuinjin's greenhouse. How could someone start a fire? This must be severely punished. Damn it, we couldn't survive as it was. Built a few greenhouses thinking it was a utopia. Who the hell knew it was actually a living hell? Hurry up and take action. Rectify what needs to be rectified. Blow up what needs to be blown up. The discussions among netizens grew increasingly intense, eventually leading to a collective belief that society was doomed. Seeing the significant drop in national confidence to survive, my pleas and warnings finally received attention, resulting in the central government forming an investigation team to look into the Qin Huizhou incident. This slightly calmed the uproar on the internet. However, in these chaotic times, the fundamental issues remain immense. That night, unexpectedly, among the new batch of seekers for help, there was a familiar face. It was the girl who, before the apocalypse, had publicly engaged with Qin Huizhou in the greenhouse. Her name is Duan Yuyu, and as soon as she arrived at the greenhouse, she demanded to see me. Xuanjin Jie. Her tears began to fall uncontrollably as soon as she saw me, as if a switch had been flipped. Her legs buckled, and she nearly collapsed to the ground, but someone nearby quickly supported her. I have evidence. All the evidence is in my hands. Together, we'll take down that villain Qin Huizhou, she said frantically, raising the USB drive in her hand. Take your time, don't rush. I pulled her to sit down, and her grievances poured out like a fish finally returning to water, finding solace, and letting it all out. Qin Huizhou is inhuman. He took in a group of people but only to turn them into sex slaves. He drove away everyone who wasn't good-looking, including children and the elderly. People were thrilled to come to his greenhouse, only to be handed tags as soon as they entered. Initially, people thought these were just ordinary number tags. Little did they know they were tags for him to choose who would sleep with him that night. And there's a whole pile of punishment systems. An institution that claims to promote social aid, yet it is fully equipped with electric shock rooms and detention rooms. Just a single word against his will could lead to public humiliation and confinement, or at war. Electric shocks and public finger chopping. He confiscated everyone's phones. I managed to record this with a miniature camera beforehand. It wasn't easy to escape. She lifted her winter coat, revealing scars on her wrist. Everyone who saw it gasped in shock. With a slap, a bottle of drink hit her head, and Duan Yuyu let out a scream. Everyone turned to look at the little culprit, the girl Tong Tong, who angrily shouted at Duan Yuyu, "You took away my former dad. You bad person." Wang Ma hurried over, apologizing while taking the child away. "Mommy will talk to you later, okay?" I comforted the child. Turning back, Duan Yuyu, who had been hit on the head with the drink, didn't dare look up. I didn't do it on purpose. I was coerced. I sighed. She didn't seem to be very old. And that scum Qin Huizhou. I held her scarred hand. "It's not your fault." Then I took the USB drive from her hand. I told her firmly, "Together, we'll make sure his evil deeds are punished." The video evidence on the USB drive was even more horrifying, something that would be restricted if posted online, filled with blood, screams, and terror. That night, we organized all the materials and sent them to the TV station, the investigation team that had been formed earlier, and posted warnings online to keep people away from his greenhouse. We thought dealing with him was coming to an end, but unexpectedly, during a rescue operation the next day, an accident happened. As usual, we led a tank rescue operation for those trapped in the extreme cold snowfield. Our vehicle was suddenly surrounded by modified tanks speeding around, and smoke grenades obscured the visibility of the cockpit. The hatch above us was suddenly lifted, and the invading gas caused everyone to fall unconscious. When I opened my eyes again, I found that my hands and feet were bound, and standing right in front of me was Qin Huizhou, staring into my eyes. My heart stopped for a moment, then I sneered disdainfully. Qin Huizhou's previous smirk turned into a scowl when he saw my indifferent expression. "Not scared? You know I'm capable of anything, don't you? Then go ahead and kill me." I looked up into his eyes without a care and said, "Although tanks are open for purchase now, dozens of modified tanks? He really is fearless." Being captured and brought to his territory. I looked around. It was exactly the confinement room featured in Duan Yu's video. He must be afraid of nothing. "We've already sent a distress signal in the car. Our people will be here soon. The news is all over the internet, and your damn greenhouse is already notorious." I stared at him. He looked straight at me without any hesitation and laughed disdainfully after I finished speaking. "Do you think that after capturing you, I would just watch you send out a distress signal? I've already intercepted the signals in that area." He looked provocative. I secretly clenched my fists, showing no expression on my face. His tone became even stronger. "Do you know how many good things you've ruined for me? It's just right that the experiment needs someone. How many days of starvation leads to death? You might as well take on this job. Not being beaten or raped is only due to our years of marriage. You'd better be grateful to me." He turned away with a mocking face. I bit my teeth, staying alone in this cramped confinement cell for an unknown amount of time, with the lights on not allowing any distinction between day and night. but it felt like a significant time had passed, so I quietly took out the micro-signal device in my hand. Nowadays, in extreme cold weather, phones are freezing and crashing outdoors. Communication devices have returned to being commonly used equipment. SOS. My hands were still tied up, and I used all my strength trying to communicate through muscle memory. Just as I clicked the send button, the door in front of me opened, and familiar leather shoes came into view. "You've got quite a lot of little gadgets," Qin Huizhou's voice rang out. He took a few steps forward and snatched the communicator from my hands, which were bound behind the chair, and crushed it under his shoes in front of me, inch by inch, until it was nothing but pieces. "I want to see what other tricks you have up your sleeve," Qin Huizhou said smugly. My last possible means appeared to be destroyed. I gnashed my teeth and, unable to bear it any longer, shouted, "Qin Huizhou, we still have a child. What do you want to do? Are you going to keep me here, to starve to death? Just because I didn't give you money? Let me ask you, didn't you already get into my father's overseas accounts through your shady means? What exactly do you want?" He suddenly threw his head back and laughed maniacally for a while, then looked at me with a strange expression, as if he were drunk. "I just want to see you like this. I want you to despair. Why are you so lucky? Out of nowhere, you get a rich father? And you dare to think you're something special because of it. Haha, I still prefer that condescending look you used to have." My eyes were bloodshot with rage, and I almost wept blood as I shouted, "Don't you ever think of our daughter? Have you become this perverse? Daughter?" He paused for a second, then burst into a mad laugh. "Are you stupid? With so many women here, I can have as many children as I want. Why should I care about a child from a woman I don't even care about?" He mocked me, staring as if I were trash. Unable to take it anymore, I ignored my bound hands and feet, lunging forward to headbutt him in the groin, and we both crashed heavily to the ground. In my haste, I glimpsed outside, seeing all the fearful young men and women with their heads lowered, a few biting their lips to hold back tears. Qin Huizhou screamed in pain and angrily kicked my head furiously, venting his rage until I was seeing stars. He only stopped when he clearly sensed the life draining out of me, and the door closed once more. I lay on the ground gasping for breath, realizing this might be the end of my life. I began to be thankful to all the Buddhas I could remember in my mind, grateful at least for having done the good deed of keeping a greenhouse in this life, hoping they would bless my child to grow up safely. As I lay there on the brink of giving up hope, the closed door quietly opened a crack. A young girl's trembling, obviously fearful voice spoke, "Sister and Xiunjin, don't be afraid. When I say so, run with me quickly." She untied my bound hands, and I forced myself to stand, clutching her hand as we dashed through the cold building. Outside, it was pitch black, the dead of night. Once outside the building, we crouched and maneuvered around a gap in the electric fence, finally exiting Qin Huizhou's greenhouse. Yunla climbed down from the tank in front, took our hands, and pulled us up. My suppressed excitement finally found its voice once the hatch closed and the tank started moving. "How did you manage it?" I received your text. An E was an undercover agent in his greenhouse, and it was about time to rescue her. He looked at the girl beside him, who was also visibly unable to contain her excitement from escaping. "There's even better news." Yunla looked at me teasingly, then suddenly burst into laughter. "Due to this incident, Qin Huizhou's investigative team has finally filed a case. The SWAT team is about to surround this place." I let out a small sigh of relief, leaning back slightly, as the weight in my heart eased a little. It wasn't until we returned safely to the base, witnessing the joyful and surprised faces around us, that I finally smiled as if waking from a dream. Qin Huizhou's base was surrounded, and he himself was arrested for causing a terror threat. What was somewhat worrying was that even with handcuffs on, watched by countless SWAT officers and under the gaze of television cameras, there was still a faint smile on his face. He was incredibly arrogant. Because I was a witness, I was also called to the station to give a statement, describing how Qin Huizhou drove an illegally modified tank to capture and detain me. Before I left, I actually saw Qin Huizhou. He was making a scene, shouting and struggling in an attempt to attack the police, but was firmly subdued. "Lawyer? I want a lawyer. You have no right to treat me like this." He shook his head, shouting irrationally, and when he turned and saw me, he suddenly sneered. "And Xiunjin, you've become quite something. I'm telling you, this isn't over. I'm a foreigner. You can't kill me here. Did you hear that? No matter the ends of the earth, you can't escape, you can't escape." He laughed maniacally. It's a sinister expression. Assistant Xiaowen stood a bit closer to me in fear, and I patted her. Without looking back, he walked forward with Xiaowen, leaving Qin Huizhou in his current miserable state. The internet has exploded with discussions. Hardly any of the young people rescued from Qin Huizhou's greenhouse are psychologically healthy. They have been tormented to the point of extreme suffering and have shared all their experiences online, revealing those horrifying atrocities. He assaulted both men and women and particularly enjoyed punishing them, going to excessive lengths. Almost every night, someone lost their life. He also had a penchant for forcing people to abuse and kill animals, including exceedingly rare species caught and brought there, compelling people to skin them alive. When attracting others, he would claim the place was the modern-day Hawaii, but in reality, most places where people lived didn't even have heating facilities. There are countless complaints and scandals, too many to mention, all posted online, causing widespread panic among netizens. If his behavior spreads, wouldn't the original greenhouse turn into a playground for those in power? Let them do whatever they want? In the extreme cold apocalypse, nearly a third of the survivors have already been lost. How can those who are still alive endure such torment? Under this trend, many people began to resist. Some stripped off their clothes and ended their lives in the extreme cold in public, rather than giving even a sliver of hope to forces like Qin Huizhou. This act led to many imitations, and everything became tense. But the final result shocked and angered everyone. Qin Huizhou was not executed, but was repatriated to Country C. Because he is now nominally an immigrant of Country C and misused my father's overseas account to move money abroad. I gritted my teeth, unwilling to believe that I could let something like this happen. Netizens exploded with outrage, climbing over the firewall to voluntarily explain the Qin Huizhou incident on international platforms. The terrible actions of Qin Huizhou in the country were being publicized, leading to the trending topic, Kill QHC, on foreign social media. People abroad, especially those in Country C, became aware that such a living demon had arrived in their nation, particularly now in the deeply ravaged and bitterly cold apocalypse. Terrifying resistance plans were brewing. Some intended to secretly shoot Qin Huizhou at the airport, while others organized a group of people involved in underground black and gray industries to plan to break him out of prison and subject him to every punishment he deserved, reenacting them on themselves. Discussions on foreign platforms became increasingly intense, with some even planning to release harmful gases into the air the moment Qin Huizhou's plane landed, leaving no one alive. A large number of POP Lu joined an almost cult-like organization, stripping naked to end their lives in the extreme cold, hoping to contribute something to preventing his entry into the country with their lives. All of this finally caught the attention of the senior officials in Country C, leading to the official announcement of Qin Huizhou's death sentence by the C country's government. In the end, the video of Qin Huizhou's execution by firing squad was spread widely online, his face full of disdain, a typical villainous look. Even before dying, he curled his lips as if laughing at something, as if he had some sinister plot still at play, until the bullet pierced through his forehead, and he fell with a thud. It was almost to the applause of people worldwide, truly satisfying everyone online. After watching the shooting video, for the first time in my life, I felt a weight lifted from my heart drop to the ground. No more need to be afraid. For the first time since the apocalypse, I let out a genuine laugh. Qin Huizhou was finally dead, but life goes on. After Duan Yuyu escaped from Qin Huizhou's base to our sanctuary, she reached the management level and showcased her talent for organizing people. She's still very young, with plenty of opportunities to find her value. The shadow Qin Huizhou cast may still linger, but she can feel life becoming increasingly bright. She no longer desperately seeks protection from others because of an absence of love. Sure, Yunla is quite a character. Despite his young age, he is very popular with children, and the young girl Tong Tong gets along with him very well. As for me, I am devoted to expanding and strengthening the greenhouse because, now that we have people of all ages, we hope the greenhouse will be capable of caring for a person from birth to death. Sure, Yunla later followed his wish and was transferred to the rescue front lines. According to him, I like the thrill and the feeling of truly saving people. As for Tong Tong, interestingly, my initial expectation for her was just to live happily as an ordinary person in the greenhouse, but who could have imagined that she would excel so much? Her dream is to become the next me. I was very pleased and told her, "You will be better than me."
And it's true.
She eventually became my right-hand person, overseeing the entire southeastern part of the country. By that time, I was almost 80 years old and decided to confidently hand over the base to her. But the best news came in the second year under Tong Tong's leadership. When the extreme cold vanished